My name is Mike Swaney, and I'm in my 5th semester at Austin Grad in the bachelor's program in Christian Studies, and on track, by the grace of God, to complete that degree next spring. I'd like to introduce to those of you who haven't met her, my wife Darlene, who's with me today, her first visit to the campus. We will be celebrating our, I'm going to choke up, 45th anniversary in about 3 weeks. And that awesome experience and the journey that it has become is a testament to the patience, kindness, and grace of Darlene, but more so to the grace of God, who inspires that incredible woman, and of the love and generosity he has extended to me through that relationship. So thanks, honey. I don't plan on slowing down, so hold on. I grew up in Ohio, right up on Lake Erie. Darlene was a mile away from me. I won't turn this into our story, but we've known each other since 5th grade. We've loved each other since about 13th grade, which was really not a grade for us. It was the only time we ever, quote, went out on a date was our senior dinner. Now, she'd referred to procrastinating. Well, Darlene and I dated. Actually, I asked her to go with me to the senior dinner because I was a class speaker and I had to give the invocation before our dinner that night. As it would happen, I didn't even think about what the words might be until I picked her up. So when we walked out of her house, I handed her the car keys and said, "Would you mind driving? I got some work to do on the way to the restaurant." She was a good sport then. She's been a good sport every day since, and so I think she's a keeper if she'll have me. Anyway, I grew up in Ohio and joined the Air Force right out of high school. The truth is, once I assimilated into the structure and the rigor of military life, I really never looked back. Darlene and I were married a year later, and we set off together on an exciting adventure, one filled with challenges, opportunities, successes, and certainly a number of rich and lasting friendships. A life that would involve 31 years in Air Force uniform, 9 of it in the Air Force Reserve, another 17 years as a federal civilian employee, and even a soft landing in which I was able to work for 2 years as a part-time defense contractor after retiring from full-time work. When I retired, people would ask me, and I would ask myself, was there anything that I missed along the way? And actually, there were a couple things. The first was the opportunity to experience a traditional college education experience. I had joined the Air Force right out of high school, and my formal college education consisted of night and weekend classes for what seemed was an endless duration. But eventually, persistence paid off, and I earned bachelor's and master's degrees. During that experience, I remember thinking many times how nice it must be to be a college student with no other obligations except studying and going to classes. And I vowed that maybe I would find a way to get to that someday. Well, all of that is well and good, and you might not be surprised to know, based on what I've told you so far, that going back to school in a more traditional way might end up as one of my retirement interests. But it doesn't answer the question, why Austin Grad? Ultimately, it's because the second thing I missed along the way as I was pursuing a professional career was a more deliberate and persistent development of my Christian education. I think I convinced myself that I would get to that someday when my very busy life slowed down. So when I finally did retire, although I'm not sure my life has slowed down much, I did hearken back to memories of what a more traditional college experience might be like, and the thoughts about taking time for a more deliberate investment in Christian studies. So I saw value in attending a seminary for a number of reasons, not the least of which was what you might call a theological force feeding. a way of somehow making up for lost time in developing my understanding and commitment to Christianity. I had always claimed, but never fully absorbed, neither in my brain or in my soul. But before Austin grad, there was another physical journey that needed to take place, the one that brought us here, back to Central Texas. Our decision to retire from paid work in 2015 was helped along by what we saw as a need to be more available to Darlene's aging parents. When they reached their 80s, we convinced them to winter with us in the South, and we lived in Huntsville, Alabama at that time, partly to get them away from the hazards of snow, ice, and cold Ohio winters, and partly because, as empty nesters ourselves, we just enjoyed their company. But as we began to spend more time with them, we were able to fully assess the effects that aging was having on them. In short, 5 years ago, we decided it was time to be closer to them on a continual basis, and the four of us liquidated our separate households and relocated to a 55 and older community in Georgetown. Some of you probably know it. It's called Sun City, or Sin City. That's another story for another audience. So by the time we settled here, my mother-in-law's Alzheimer's had advanced to the point that she required persistent caregiving. Her husband's physical condition was also declining rapidly, the result of multiple strokes and pulmonary issues. We got a note from Darlene's brother, who's with her dad this morning, and he was reporting the first fall of the day. So it happens, and that's what our life is. A beautiful, wonderful opportunity to serve people that we love, but it's not always a good day. Anyhow, as we transitioned into full-time caregiver roles, we found we were spending most of our time every day just being present for the parents, a role that, at least for me, allowed for some concurrent activity. I decided to venture back into the classroom and started looking for a blended format of on-campus and online classes. Now, this was all playing out at a time that my newfound freedom in retirement was allowing me to invest myself in new ways. My experience in the Sun City community, where we now live, and a deeper engagement in the church there pointed me to theology. Actually, I think it was me praying for guidance and God doing the pointing. Austin grad came by way of a Google search. Its blended format of on-campus and online courses met my need for balance with my caregiving role. A campus visit and 45-minute conversation with Don Bond, who was the registrar at the time, and an introduction to Dave Arthur impressed us with the school's authentic concern for student development. The school's small size represented power in the intensity of small class engagement. It felt right, so I gave it a try. And it has continued to feel right 3 years later. As an aside, is Dr. McNichol in the room? It'll be lost. Okay. He will verify this. As an aside, our church in Sun City got a new assistant pastor about a year ago. His name is Maury Milliken, and he joined the staff. Recently, soon after he joined the staff, I found myself in conversation with him, and I was excited to meet him and tell him all about my experiences as a seminarian. Now, that's a term that's really fun to say, because people will react to it. And they're like, I'm not sure how to deal with this person all of a sudden. So I like to use it to good advantage. Well, he reacted encouragingly and seemed interested. So I told him of this small, not widely known school in North Austin called Austin School of Theology. And as I was about to continue, he stopped me and said, Austin grad, I went there. He then recounted for me the year he spent at Austin grad some 20 plus years ago. It may have been ICS back then. And how that experience at an important decision point in his life had served as the inspiration for him to move on to a larger seminary in pursuit of full-time ministry. You know, every so often I get a sense of revelation when I'm in a stimulating conversation with someone, as if God is participating silently, just nodding his approval. Do you ever get that sense? It's reassuring. That conversation with Pastor Morey was one of those moments. Another came a few days later. I arrived here at class and chatted up Dr. McNichol, telling him about the crazy coincidence of meeting a new pastor who was himself a former Austin grad student. And Dr. McNichol asked, "What's his name?" And when I told him, he said, "Oh yes, I remember Morey," with a tone of recognition as if he had just seen him a week prior. Another coincidence? Sure. Why not? I happen to believe that God takes pleasure in designing coincidences that serve to grow his kingdom. Without sounding too cliche, I think I arrived at a point in my life 3 years ago with a particular thirst, a particular yearning, and Austin grad was the water that has been very good at quenching that thirst. As for Dr. McNichol, recalling a student who might have been merely a single face in a crowd, students who had passed through Austin grad over 20 years, his recollection is representative of the attitude I see in each of the professors here. Whether they are lecturing in a traditional classroom or facilitating a dynamic online course, it's a level of commitment to mentorship and Christian enlightenment that is so much more than a job to them. And we as students are the fortunate recipients of their commitment. So I can't talk about Austin grad without taking another minute to tell you why the experience here has been so satisfying. It's all about the faculty and staff. The administrative staff, to a person, is an incomparable group of committed and caring people who make it their priority to serve students. And they do it brilliantly, wonderfully. Thank you. And in particular, the professors deserve credit for being the positive role models that they are. I'd like to share just a few thoughts about some of the profs I've come to know. Dr. Shipp. I met Dr. Shipp in my first semester here when I sat in his Story of Israel class. That initial experience opened a lens of discovery that helped me see and appreciate the Old Testament in its greatest portrayal as the roots of our Christian faith. Now stay with me. Just like a sports car can take you from 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, Dr. Shipp's Lamborghini lecture style took me from 0 to 77 in 6 weeks. You see, I arrived here in the fall of 2017 as pretty much a 0. I knew that the Old Testament was a set of writings that started with the creation story and ended well before the time of Christ. But I had no idea what a Pentateuch was, let alone how to pronounce it. I could probably name a dozen books of the Old Testament, but couldn't tell you much about their individual content or relevance. So on day one of Dr. Shipp's class, I started drinking Old Testament from a fire hose. And the flow of names, dates, prophets and prophecies, stories of human wanderings and human failings, all came at me like a torrential downpour. And about 6 weeks later, I sat for the first exam in that course. It was only 25 questions. Not bad, you say? All essay questions. I remember him saying something to the effect that he didn't want to make the first test too hard. So he only required us to answer 20 of them. Gee, thanks. What a guy. I remember one of the questions. I'll never forget it. It asked us to talk about the book of Judges. Asked more specifically for us to name the judges. All of them. And where they were from. And what they are known for. Well, at that moment I thought, Swaney, you wanted an opportunity to make up for lost time in learning about your faith, and you're definitely getting your money's worth. I received a 77 on that test. That's the 77. And wore that score as a badge of honor. Given the distance I had traveled in 6 weeks, I was proud of that score. and the growth in Old Testament knowledge it represented. Prouder than any 100 I'd gotten in any secular class. In that same semester, I was reintroduced by Todd Hall to the practice of research and writing, this time as applied to theology, awakening a set of skills that had laid dormant in me for nearly 20 years. The truth is, I might have enrolled in seminary with a greater sense of curiosity than passion. I wanted to see if the curriculum would challenge and inspire me, but not overwhelm me. If that's what brought me here, Todd's encouragement in that first semester is probably what kept me here. And while I didn't arrive with innate passion, I soon discovered that it lived here in the likes of Dr. Shipp's lectures. That favorable impression in the first semester set the hook, and I've returned each semester with equal excitement and anticipation for the new challenges that awaited. And Austin Grad has never failed to deliver. I've enjoyed Dr. McNichol's passion for sharing the relentless, unjustified gifts we receive in the form of God's love and grace, demonstrated to me in the conviction, conversion, and works of Paul through his letters, a grace theme I would later use in a sermon. And in the current semester, a biblical theology course by Dr. McNichol that explores God's persistent promises to an undeserving people, but a people he has chosen. In my third and fourth semesters, Dr. Peterson introduced me to the mysteries of biblical Greek language. I heard Stephen Lawson comment in his remarks earlier, and I'm not wearing my hearing aids, so I might have misunderstood him. But I think at one point he said he admired the hard work of the professors and the mysterious work of the students. Well, I've delivered some mysterious products to Austin. In any case, Dr. Peterson introduced me to the mysteries of biblical Greek language, somewhere along the way in his many years of teaching Greek, an exercise he must feel is sometimes akin to dispensing medicine to a recalcitrant child, medicine that, like castor oil, is very good for you, but doesn't always go down easily. He decided that a sprinkling of comedic relief was just what the doctor ordered. Or maybe it was he himself who decided early on, you know, Jeff, if I'm going to make this my life's work, I better develop a sense of humor about it. In either case, on behalf of current and past Greek students everywhere, we're grateful to you, Dr. Peterson, for that treasured jewel, the verbomatic, and for your generous helpings of humor. Thanks to you, Biblical Greek is now innate in my psyche. Since finishing your second semester class, I'm happy to say that I no longer wake up in a cold sweat at 4 a.m., struggling to conjugate verbs and parse sentences, like in a dreamlike oral exam state. But the fundamental knowledge of Greek you imparted is an important tool in my intellectual toolkit, and I'm not afraid to pull it out and use it. In fact, I value the benefits that arise from that, as I seek to more fully grasp and reflect on the Word. Then there's Dr. Stanglin, who is possibly the most brilliant academician, one of those guys, ethicist and historian I've ever known. I say that with all the conviction of a student whose term paper for the church history course was emailed to his inbox just yesterday, and now sits in the grading queue for his consideration. Seriously, the church history course I just wrapped up is my second engagement with Dr. Stanglin, the first being a course in Christian ethics, and I can honestly say both experiences were equal parts challenging and revealing, which to me, a serious student, translates as enriching. I'm grateful to you for that. And to all the faculty and staff here, I am grateful for you giving me, as I step fully into what likely will be the fourth and final quarter of my human existence, wonderful tools and points of light with which to make that journey even more satisfying, certainly from a spiritual perspective, than it might have been otherwise. The last topic I was asked to address is by far the easiest. How do I see myself using what I am gaining at Austin Grad in kingdom work? I see myself using it the same way I have been using it almost from the time I started attending here. I will use it to answer a call I hear from God, a call that puts me in time and space where my light can shine. For the past 3 years, I have been involved in a neighborhood ministry in our community, a particularly valuable service to the significant number of church members in a 55 and older community who come there with generally good health, but who in increasing numbers find themselves homebound or otherwise limited by the effects of aging. That is a distinct mission field in its own right. I have had the opportunity and privilege to preach sermons on a number of occasions at our church, countenanced by the grace of God, the support of an encouraging pastor, and the mechanics of sermon preparation and presentation taught here at Austin Grad. I'm looking forward to my first ever mission trip to Haiti in February, and look forward at some future point to taking on a leadership role in Christian education at our church. And in a less formal way, I see and respond to informal opportunities to minister virtually every day. I'm grateful for having been given the eyes to see those opportunities in fresh light of spiritual inspiration. Maybe more than anything, the Austin Grad experience has changed my Christian outlook, and now I slow down and think and reflect and at times recalibrate when I hear words like neighbor and faith and grace and salvation. Those terms have life and meaning I don't think I recognized in them 3 years ago. In short, I see myself using what I am gaining at Austin Grad for the very purpose I suspect was always intended. In any way God calls me to use it, for His glory and for the furtherance of His kingdom. Christian servanthood. Now that's a job with a wonderful boss and a wonderful retirement plan. Thank you. God bless you.